It's my pleasure to introduce Greg Short, CEO and co-founder of EEDAR, the world's largest video game marketing research firm. Greg's going to lead us through the data and studies, and in short, he's going to tell us what we need to know to understand what we need to know about the media mix. So, Greg?
Thank you so much. Hello. What do you guys think of the Gen Y panel? Was that interesting for you all? I thought there were some interesting correlations that I'm going to transcend hopefully into this presentation. So I think it was a good starting point. So as Karen mentioned, Greg Short, CEO at EEDAR. Today, we're going to talk about a lot of different topics. We're going to talk about how the industry's been changing, about how consumers are changing, how mix has been changing to meet that, and then kind of some of the challenges that we face as an industry moving forward. So hopefully you'll find it enlightening, and hopefully there'll be time at the end for questions and answers. It is being videotaped, so you'll be able to get a copy of that through the archive when we're done. If you want a copy of the deck, Jim Riley, my media specialist, is in the room somewhere. He'll be here as you're leaving. If you give him your card, he'll send you a copy of the deck today, so you can get that and take a look at it this afternoon. So without further ado, let's get into it. This was me. I was one of these people. We loved them so well, didn't we? The core gamers we used to know. Though they didn't have Wii's back then necessarily until the end. You know, I've been doing this conference for a few years now. And I do obviously lots of presentations. And it's been very interesting to me to watch what we define as the core gamer. And there's a lot of discussions and arguments that go on between people about, does the core gamer still exist? What does core mean? What's a core mobile gamer? What's a core, Farmville player? I think in our heart of hearts, a lot of the people in this room who've been in the marketing business for a while and in the games business for a while, when we think core gamer, we still think about this person right here. The college graduate or college sort of age person, male generally, and the games that they're playing, the traditional core games. But the reality is that this gamer here is changed a lot over the last few years, and they're getting a lot more picky. We saw downstairs at the Gen Y stuff, they want everything brought to them. They're not going out as hungrily as they used to, trying to find the games that we're making for them. And part of the problem with the generation that we had before that we all knew so well is that they're changing now. They have a lot of things that are competing for their time. One of the big things competing for their time, our kids, is my daughter Madeline. She's awesome. I love her. This was her Halloween face that she greeted people at the front door with this year. It was like, I think she was scarier than the kids. But the thing is, like for me nowadays, like sleep is an entertainment choice, right? My wife will happily tell you, like if it's like watch a movie or get 2 hours of extra sleep, sleep is often preferred. And this is just one of the many, many things that has changed about the core gamers that we used to know, right? They're growing up, they're having kids, they're having families, they're getting careers, and there's this new generation of people that are filling that core gamer. And the one thing that we're finding out about this new generation of people is they're much harder to get to. They're much harder to find. And so as a result of that, as we've changed the way that we're trying to reach out to these people, there's been hits and misses. I think we've all experienced with different campaigns over the last few years. Some of them have worked really, really well, and then we've tried the same campaign 6 months later, and it's like, didn't quite work as well. Like, what's changed? And the reality is what's changing are the people that we're changing to. And they're getting a lot harder to find in the right place, to match what their needs are at the right time. So who are the gamers of today? Obviously, they're talking about it downstairs, these hardcore esports niche. They're not gone completely. I mean, there are still the core gamer. They're still out there, still buying games. In fact, making up a significant amount of our revenue. They're a fairly good portion of the whales in the mobile and tablet space. They're still the ones that are buying a lot of the new games and pre-ordering the collector's editions and driving that business. But in addition to them, we have this older generation of people who are getting into games, whether they're playing simple games like Angry Birds on the cell phone or they're doing Wii bowling at the retirement center. There is a broader demographic of people who are getting into the gaming community. And of course, kids. I was speaking with someone last night at the dinner that the speakers get to do before the show, and they were telling me like their 2-year-old is playing iPad games, like complicated games. Like they know what leveling up is. And they're like, I gotta level up. I'm like, they're 2. I'm trying to think with my 18-month-old, I'm like, all she wants to do is turn it off. And like they've got a 2-year-old over here who can play. So clearly, the relationship between the generation of us who grew up with games, I mean, we want to play games with our kids because we do find that that's an entertainment option for us. But the kids are also growing up with a completely different experience with games. They didn't have to go through CGA graphics on PCs and like, which driver do I install on my computer, right? Everything just works. It's there whenever they want it. Unlimited entertainment choices electronically on demand. And that ability to have access to that entire catalog is changing the way that they're approaching it. I mean, demographically, what's really interesting, and of course these are 2 very different large segments, but if you take all of the males 17 and under and all of the women 18 and older, there's more people in the female demographic that are in that larger age group playing games. So, we have to recognize the fact that our demographic is not the demographic that we knew. The core gamer focused market is shifting away from us, and we have a new demographic coming in. And that demographic are general entertainment consumers. They are not just thinking about games. You heard it downstairs. They want to go to sports. They want to go to concerts. They want to sleep. They want to do all these different things, and gaming is just one of their choices that they could have. It's still a good choice, though. This is a study that Nielsen actually ran last year that kind of looks at spread of time, and some of these numbers are a little bit small to see on the screen. But what you can really see out of this is that television is still a big part of people's lives. People are still watching a lot of TV. People are still watching DVDs, watching video on demand. They're playing games, but they're doing these things across a much broader spectrum of devices. They're doing it on their tablet, on their smartphones. They're doing it on their PC. They're doing it on their TV. They're doing it at friends' houses. They're tweeting. They're getting more engaged in a lot of different ways. So it's not that the industry's gone, but it is definitely changing from what we knew. And the attention spans are changing with that. We would think that part of the reason that attention spans are shifting is, well, everyone's getting older, and as we get older, our brains don't work as well. Actually not the case. Scientific studies have not shown that older age actually leads to shorter attention spans. It leads to a whole bunch of other problems, but doesn't lead to shorter attention spans. However, consumer attention spans are shrinking. Anyone want to hazard a guess as to what attention spans were 10 years ago? One person. 10 minutes, pretty close. It was 12 minutes last year, 10 years ago. Last year was a lot shorter. Anyone want to hazard a guess as to what it is today? 10 years ago, 12 minutes. Today, 5 seconds. 5 seconds. So this was run by a study of people who were tracking a whole bunch of reactions to websites and how quickly people leave websites based on different A/B testing of contents and things. And they did this over a period of time, and they basically determined it's 5 seconds. And then they went and looked at these old age studies, and they said, well, is it just because we're too busy? Is it because we're distracted? And what they've really determined is part of it is the changing generations and they're on demand, but really a big part of it is it's our own fault. And the reason it's our own fault is the internet. The reality is that digital media has been designed to be acquired, shared, purchased like as quickly as possible, right? Because we're so scared of keeping their attention, we keep making everything faster and faster and faster. And so as a result of that, they now have no attention span. So there was another study which I found very, very interesting, which basically tried to understand how quickly do you lose people. And what they found with streaming videos, so this is your Netflix and your YouTubes and your Machinimas, for every 2 seconds that people have to wait, you lose 6% of the audience. So after 2 seconds, for every second they have to wait, you lose 6% of the audience. And what they found, which I thought was very, very interesting, is if people were told you're on a high-speed connection before they did the test, they were twice as likely to leave faster. So people, if they think, I'm on a high-speed connection, this should be quick, they'll bail even quicker. So on their cell phones, they're a little bit more patient. They're like, oh, it's a cell phone, But on their home PC or on a home network, they're very, very impatient, which we heard downstairs, right? There's all these different things that they can do. They can go party or whatever they want to do. So it's very it's just a different audience. We used to have this opportunity to have someone watch a full 30-second trailer on TV. It'd be like, great, they're going to see this really cool boss battle at the end. Now, they flick the channel like 3 seconds into that commercial, like they want to go find the next UFC match. So we have to realize that part of our problem is we've got this generation of consumers. They want everything given to them. They are impatient. We're reinforcing their impatience. As a culture, this isn't something just about the game industry, but as a culture, we're reinforcing impatience by making things more accessible, faster, always on demand. And as we move to this always on community, it's going to create some challenges for us as an industry trying to reach those people to get them to pick our entertainment choice. So, I thought it would be interesting to look at how our market landscape is shifting. And all of this is sort of coming to the media mix thing, so rest assured I will hit my topic. But we've seen a decline in traditional retail digital console type games. So this is in the USA only. We're just trying to focus for this segment on the United States. But what we saw over the last few years was what everyone kind of knows, right? We saw less games coming to market. And those games still represented reasonably good revenue, but we all kind of pulled it back. There was risk, we've had contraction. Pricing's been problematic. The attach rate has dropped over the last few years. When we started this cycle, the attach rate was around about 5 to 6 games a year. It's 1.8 games a year at retail right now. Is that used games? Yeah, maybe a little bit, but is it people switching to other game types? Probably more. So, we have challenges, and the big challenge is if we're all like, yay, mobile's gonna be our savior, well, guess what? You're competing with a lot of noise, right? Last year alone, 43,000 unique games just on iOS. That doesn't include Android. That doesn't include Windows. All right, so there is a lot of games out there that are filling up that channel. And it's making it very, very hard for us to break free. And so we think, okay, well, we're marketers. We have money to spend. We can take care of this, and we can break through and hit the top. Some other interesting stats. Retail titles last year, North America, 12.5% of titles generated 75% of the revenue. Okay, so the orange represents that. You can see the action category is a big category, slightly higher percentage. But in a lot of these other categories, like music and rhythm, Just Dance crushed it. There's a lot of other ones that came out, but that's pretty much where most of that money's coming from. Very small percentage of titles are really, really pushing our industry forward on a revenue perspective at retail right now. And when you think about how much money each of these represents, some of these are very interesting. Like, the narrative genre, there's a few games, but they're all competing over, $600 million? There's money to be made out there, but we have a complete upside down situation when it comes to supply and demand. We're throwing all these games into the channel thinking there's tons of money to be made in them, and in some cases, there isn't. There's one person, one game, 2 games, couple of brands. They own the space. Unless you're coming to market with something that's really revolutionary or really going to push the envelope, you're not going to break through that. Because not only do we have 12.5% of games representing 75% of revenue, 9% of games represent 75% of direct media. So we're basically seeing the big games buying up all of the mind share, right? It's very, very hard unless you want to throw a lot of money into the channel to try and migrate those users away from you. So, and even on the marketing spends, it's a similar sort of story when you look at how much money is being spent in terms of these various verticals. There's obviously action they're spending a ton of money in, shooter they're spending a ton of money in, but some of these other verticals, skill and chance, not a lot of money went in there last year. Maybe that's an opportunity where you can get it. But what we're seeing is people are going after the areas where they think the money is. They're going after the genres that are the most oversaturated because they're like, well, shooter, that's core. People buy games. Let's put out another shooter. There's Battlefield and Call of Duty, guys. It's really hard to break through with a shooter. So, obviously, we're going to have to start thinking a little bit differently about where we go, redefining what is USP. Because not only have we got this group of people here who are very well trained in terms of the messages they're receiving, and they're just waiting to be told FIFA 13's out, and off they go, good little loyalists. Yay, my next game. PES is having trouble. Right? We're having a lot of other trouble with even established brands competing with themselves anymore because the attach rates are going down and the attention spans are getting shorter. So, what does this all mean? What's the fundamental takeaway from the last 10 minutes of my presentation here? Pretty simple. We have a small realization to make, which is that we cannot operate outside the laws of supply and demand, which is what we've been doing and continue to do. And from what I can see, we'll continue to do for the next year at least or 2 years, which is we feel that if we just keep putting the games out there, there's enough of an audience. There's 400 million cell phones. Someone's got to like my game. Okay, good luck. It's very, very, very challenging conditions that we're operating in. And as an industry, we need to get smarter about how we're going to start thinking about the supply and demand issue. Now, some of these will organically evolve. We know that mobile games are going to get more expensive to produce. There's going to be higher fidelity demand from the consumers as they get more educated about the games they like. And that's going to cause there to be a contraction in all the garage developers who can't put more shovelware out into the channel and clog up discovery. All these things organically will kind of happen. But in the meantime, we're really going to struggle quite significantly with how do we get above that noise. If you walk into a GameStop today and you look at the, what is remaining of the Wii section, how do you find the good games from the bad games? It's really hard because there's like this wall of Wii. But most of the games, unfortunately, towards the end there, were just, they were just pushing out what was there. So something we have to work on because the retail environment reflects everything that we're saying. Sales are continuing to get more front-loaded. I don't have the 2012 model here yet, but I can tell you it's even higher. It's about 65% of sales happen in month 1 now for retail titles. Price protection, average price protection is 3 weeks now. It's brutal out there at retail. Part of it, there's a bunch of great games that they want to keep shelf space for. But the other part of it is just that, consumers are very, shiny. They're just chasing the next big thing. And there's a lot of things, as we mentioned, that are competing for their attention. So they'll wait for a game. If you can get into pre-order, great. We'll talk about that in a minute. But fundamentally, we have a very short window to make a lot of money for the bets that we're making. And I'm sure you will feel that pressure from your sales teams, from your managers about we've got to execute this. We've got to get those pre-orders up because you've got 3 weeks to get the majority of your sales. So where are we at in terms of next gen, right? Next gen's going to save us. Be optimistic. So this is pretty much where we're at with traditional games right now. The next gen pivot represents kind of the split at the end there. So traditional games, they went from 29 to 39, back to 34 to 49. Now they're at 59. And now they're coming back to 49. But with next gen, they'll go back to 59. Don't worry, the consumers totally understand what we're doing. But the problem that we have now is that we're trying to split the perception somewhat as an industry, but we're not really getting the message through to consumers because on the one hand, we're saying that the next gen HD games are worth $60. Actually, they're worth more like $80 if you buy all the DLC that we're hoping you purchase. Even more perhaps, right? But everything that's in the middle, all those 70 to 75 rated games are going to basically fail. They're going to move to either some sort of new catalog business model or they're going to move to free-to-play. They're going to be some sort of PlayStation Plus giveaway. There is no room in our industry for mid-grade games anymore. If you're making mid-grade games, cancel them. You're not going to make your money. You have to find different ways to make money. You've got to be pushing quality. Or embrace the low end, which is fine, but there's 40,000 other games out there trying to do the same thing, right? So how is your game going to be different enough to command that attention? What are you doing from a marketing strategy perspective that's going to excite people to be like, that game's the next Clash of Clans? So part of our problem, of course, is that whilst we hope that this is the model that we go with, the reality, as we talked about, is that the majority of our core Gen Y millennial population have been trained that this is how much they pay for games. So there's a gap. There's a gap in terms of value proposition. And when we think about what that value proposition represents, it's like, well, how are we going to get people to understand the difference between something we're selling down here and something that we're selling up there? Well, how have we been doing so far? Let's take a look at that. You can go out, and I've got a slide coming up that breaks this down a little bit more. If you take a look at season passes, which were kind of like the DLC du jour of last year, it's all over the shop in terms of how much we charge, how much we give. A consumer has no idea when they pay $5 for a piece of downloadable content, whether they're getting 5 hours of gameplay or a gun. It's very, very hard to understand value proposition. As an industry, we have not done a very good job of coming up with best practices to help govern ourselves when it comes to, can a consumer understand what they're getting for their money? predictably when they're spending things. Games, pretty much the same situation, right? Unfortunately. Jumper, 27 Metacritic. Way to go, Brash. I can say that because they're no longer in business. And on the other end, we have Bioshock and Skyrim, like fantastic 94, 96 rated games. They're all $60. I don't understand. This comes back to supply and demand. How does a consumer understand when they're getting one game that they can play for 60 hours or 80 hours, or Call of Duty 1,000 hours for $60, and then on the other hand that they get these other titles that are completely different experiences. Now, one would argue, well, that's what happens when you go to the movies. You pay your $13 and you pray. Yeah, but it's $13. It's not $60, and it's an hour of my life. It's not potentially more. So once again, this is sort of reflective of the paradigm that we're facing a problem with, which is we're confusing our consumers, particularly this generation of consumers who we heard downstairs. I'm waiting for my promo code on Facebook. I'm waiting for a friend to tell me that I should play it. If we're not creating the environment where that's going to occur, then we're going to be really struggling. And what happens when we struggle? Well, guess what? These games come in and they disrupt the market. And the way they're disrupting the market is they're not stealing necessarily all the money away from core gaming, but you know what they're doing? They're eroding demand. Because if you can play 2 hours of gaming in 2-minute increments throughout the day, when you go home, you don't have that burning desire necessarily to always jump in and play another 2 hours of gaming. Go for a walk with the dog, go to the beach, enjoy the Southern California lifestyle, right? So this is where it's changing, because what we're getting now is people who are realizing, I don't mind paying free's good, and I don't mind paying $1, maybe $2. But what's really interesting, and I'm sure if you ask your friends, it's going to be a common thing. I don't understand this. I don't know if there's any psychologists in the room. Maybe they can help me understand it better. I struggle to pay $3 for a game, but I'll pay $3 for a cup of coffee, no problem. $3. $3. My cab fare's $3 when I sit in the seat. And yet, for something that could be 10 hours of fun for me to play or 50 hours of fun for me to pay, $3 seems expensive. There's this complete issue with price framing in these consumers where value propositions are just really hard to understand. Even though it's $3, it's very, very small. So, we have this confused market that we have basically created ourselves. And it's not just us. I mean, there's tons of issues, as we know, right? There's the business models from the platform operators. There's the production costs. There's royalties and licensing structures and fees. There's all these other things that come back to why we have this problem. But fundamentally, as an industry, I think stage one is accepting we have a problem. I accept we have a problem. I thought this was a really interesting slide. I had my data guys pull this up out of the database yesterday, and it was very, very interesting when I looked at value propositions. This is just a slice of different season passes that came out last year. For those who don't know, what is a season pass? Season passes are where we incentivize people to buy all of their DLC before we give it to them, which the lawyers hate because now we're committed to actually make the DLC. And the developers hate because if we don't sell enough games, now we're just basically operating at a loss because we know the attach rate's not there to sell more. So it's kind of scary. But anyway, we like it because maybe it makes our ARPU go up $6. So what's really interesting is the season pass prices have been all over the shop, right? Some of them been 25, some have been 10, some have been 50. Some of this I actually like because it reflects supply and demand a little bit. Bigger games like Battlefield should be able to charge a little bit more perhaps than, like a new IP that's trying to come on the block. I don't know, but I do like that there's some price. The challenge is when you get over to what you get, because then it's very, very variable. The savings in terms of, so what's the saving thing mean? If you don't buy season pass, you can still buy the DLC individually as pieces, right? So this reflects how much money would you save if you buy the season pass versus if you buy it a la carte. The savings are variable, but Uncharted 3, for example, has been excellent value, saving $42 if you had bought the $25 pass. But the content's a little bit more variable. Yeah, there's been some map packs, there's been some themes, there's been some guns and some playable characters and things. The value propositions are very, very different, depending upon the type of game. I mean, what do you do with Forza? Tracks and cars, right? I mean, it's hard to do more. Or is it? And this is where things are getting more interesting, because we are starting to see people playing with new business models. Episodic games. Who thinks they're a good idea? There's a few of you. That's good, if you have a good brand. Because the average churn rate on episodic games is about 20% episode to episode. So unless you can bring in more than 20 people on the next episode by episode 4, there's really not very many people playing your game. So your game has to rock, or you have to have a great brand that you can keep funneling people back in with, like Walking Dead did. FIFA's killing it with their whole game within game concept with Ultimate Team. I mean, that's where Peter Moore's doing the happy dance. Like, yeah, money from FIFA. It is. They've done a fantastic job. They've executed against a program that is actually driving, Hubert from Curse.com said last night, they're getting 5 times the user activity on their website with people coming to research and be involved with Ultimate Team versus what they get from World of Warcraft. It is highly engaged for the people that are into this. And guess what? They're staying within the ecosystem. They're staying within FIFA. You don't have to go and find them again. They're right there. Disk ejection's always been a huge problem for DLC. Once the disk is gone, how do you get them to bring the disk back to play the DLC? It's really hard. So keeping people within games is a really good strategy if you can find cohesive ways to do that. And of course, then taking it multi-platform. How do you take it to their phone, take it to their tablet, take it to their PC, beyond the game, but have ways for them to come back and still have an HD high-fidelity experience within the game? These are things that marketers, we all face the challenge of sitting down with game designers and trying to get them to think the way we think, but this is where we need to be having a louder voice. We need to be helping our production people understand how this market is shifting and how the games need to adapt. And who wouldn't want to have stock in Supercell? I'd love to have stock in Supercell. Can't afford it. But this mid-core gaming is what everybody wants. I can't even tell you how many projects we're working on with people trying to make mid-core games right now. And we're trying to help push people in the right direction, but the reality is we're all chasing the same group of people. It's going to be very competitive. Clearly, this is what we think we're going after, that this is perhaps where the whales are. These somewhat core-type gamers that have moved to mobile, that are willing to spend money, they have time. So we did this study last year, chasing these people, trying to understand them. We called it our Emerging Markets Report, where we kind of looked at, what are the different segments between people who just don't pay for anything, majority of the Gen Ys who want everything for free, then the minnows, the dolphins, the whales, and then we made this new segment that we called killer whales. And this is how much they spend per month, right? So this is not how much they spend per game per year. They're spreading this across all sorts of different gaming experiences. Killer whales on average are playing 4 to 10 games at any single time, simultaneously. They're spreading that money around. But what's interesting, and we found as we went through this, is the way that they interact. Killer whales and whales will proactively go out and look for the game that they want to play. Everybody else waits for someone to tell them that it's a game they should play. So, even though that dolphins and minnows make up the substantial population of people who pay, if you can't get the killer whales and the whales to create that virality initially, it's going to be really hard to find them because they're waiting to be told by their friends, by their other players who they're going to play with. It was also really interesting. We put a story with Mike in the USA Today about it, that mothers tend to control the games that people play inside their house. They have the largest influence in mobile. They have the largest influence over games that are multiplayer played games in their house. They're like, kid, you're going to play this game with me. It's great. But what are we doing to reach out to those moms and to find the games that they're willing to get their family embraced with? Not that much. So, media mix. What does this all mean? Why have I gone through all of this? Well, the reason that I've gone through all of this is to help you understand that we have a really big problem. And our really big problem is that we have a completely different audience who want to pay for games completely differently to the way that we experienced, and they're in places that we don't even know necessarily where they are half the time, and yet we're trying to operate our $50 billion a year industry, hopefully $80 billion over the next few years, in a productive way, that we all have jobs and that we all make money. So what's changing about that and how we get in there? So I've got some stuff we can talk about. So quick definitions for those who don't know, sort of above the line stuff is your traditional direct media, online ads, sort of the bigger point of presence stuff. Below the line, more of your experiential stuff, concerts and things, and co-branding opportunities, some more targeted channel activities, and things from earned media, and then the sort of viral organic stuff, right? So these are kind of the 3 buckets that I'm going to work with. Everyone has their own definitions. These are the ones that I'm going to work with today. So what's been going on above the line over the last few years? Well, we saw a big dip. We did see pullback, and last year the average spend started to creep back up. Why? Well, we had less games and we're placing bigger bets. So that's kind of why that crept back up. But significantly in direct media space, we're still seeing that TV is representing, where we're pushing the message. And I can tell you statistically, if you're launching a big game that's going to go to retail, if you don't have TV, if you're going out with online only, don't do it. Free research paper for you right there. There has not been a game that has done an internet-only campaign that has sold over 500,000 units. So, just saying. At retail, at least. Obviously, Facebook and mobile is a little bit different. So when you're looking at this, is print dying? Well, it's definitely shrinking, right? The amount of spend is shrinking. Why? Well, we have less print magazines to spend on. That's one start. But it's moving to more of the online space. What was interesting is that we saw a bit of a contraction in internet spend over the last couple of years. In 2010, 2011, we saw this really interesting trend where basically we're like, well, we know lots of people are playing Farmville. Let's advertise Call of Duty to them. All right, it was kind of weird, but there was a lot of spend. And of course, as we saw the social bubble kind of burst, costs came back down a little bit. People got a little bit more targeted about the way that they do it. Now Battlefield pays for Call of Duty and Call of Duty pays for Battlefield and swap users all day. But it's interesting the way that shift has been happening. I mean, I expect that this shift will continue. I think we're going to continue to see, on the premium side of the gaming business, bigger advertising spends on smaller number of games. It's moving more towards Hollywood. We're going to have N blockbusters a year, but they're going to really go out there and they're going to own their months. So what's interesting when you look beyond the traditional games and you start looking at these emerging markets is, well, why are people playing them? And the reason that I bring this into the direct media is to point out what I thought was a pretty reasonable observation, which is the majority of people, when they're playing these sort of smaller spurts of games, they're not doing it to play games, generally speaking. It's like rank 4, the first one that kicks in there. Most of the time, they're doing it to pass time, take a break, do a short gaming session. I'm doing it with something else. It's a time filler, right? They're either waiting in line somewhere, or they're waiting for their friend to turn up, or they're having a coffee. It's not necessarily they're gaming because they want a game. That's where a lot of, we would think that, but it's not the case with these new types of consumers. And yet, what are we doing to really take the message to the right place? I still don't see, Assassin's Creed did a great job last holiday. If you go to New York, you'll see it a fair amount on the subways. In the UK on the tube, they're great about plastering the tube with it. But we don't really do a good job of it. I mean, let's face the facts. Why is there not an advertisement at every single airport gate for me to download a game before I get on a plane? And most of the games, most of the planes have internet now. Why isn't, where's my Sky Mall 99-cent game selection? I mean, they're there. They're on a plane for an hour and a half. What are they going to do? Read Sky Mall again? I think I know that magazine cover to cover now. Obviously, there's the Starbucks sort of, there's the song of the day. Where's the, song of the week? Where's the game of the week? EA did that a little promo with it last year, but it's not really being leveraged. I'm sure the DMV would love it if we co-partner with them on something. I know, I have the appointment. I skipped that line, but doctors' offices, or or even urgent cares, car service centers. What a place to put a car game, right? Guess what? Yes, your oil change is going to take 2 hours. Here, go play a game. And there's lots of opportunities for us to take the games to the people, which was one of the things that we saw in the conversation downstairs. They don't want to work. They're not going to come and find your game for the most part. You have to take your game to them, where they are, when they want to play, on their terms. So if you don't understand what those terms are or where they're at, then you're going to really struggle to find those people that want to give you their money. So, right message at the right time. Keep that in your head. What's interesting is if you walked into a GameStop today or a Walmart, Best Buy, we have a service where we go into all the major North American retailers and we capture all the different promotions that are going on every week. So at any given point in time, there's around 100 different promotions going on asking you to pre-order something. From pre-order cards to posters to standees to stickers to t-shirts to lanyards, whatever it might be. So there's a lot of noise, right? And everyone's out there going, pre-order, pre-order. And so what do? Well, you go to your developer and like, dude, we need something to really get people to pre-order our game. What will we do? Well, in 2010, this is what we did. Get a gun. Get a gun. Get a gun. Guess what we did last year? Get a gun. Get a gun and a game. Sweet. So you'd think, this same standee that ran the same time, Crisis should have done better, right? Well, unfortunately, it didn't quite work out that way. What's really interesting, they got the same review score. They ran pretty much the same amount of channel advertising. They had the same direct media campaign length. Crisis actually had more YouTube views. A lot of those came from Europe. Those were the sales for the first month. So what's going on? Well, there was a lot more print attention coming from this. We have another service where we track all the print media. We're doing online media as well now. It's launching later this year. But what's really interesting is this number, what we're seeing from this is the amount of people talking about your game in editorial is becoming a very strong reflection of how well you're executing against your campaign. Editorial is more important than ever before. Not just in terms of your curated message, but what you're doing to help the bloggers and these other microsites have good assets and good stories to talk about. I mean, we all cry at the copy and paste journalism that exists today. I mean, it's really tough. But the reality is, PR is probably underserviced in this business at this point. Most companies that I work with, PR is like this percentage of the budget. And it's really hard for them to get the right assets in time, to have the resources to reach out to people, to build the right relationships. They're going to need more help because, as I'm going to show you in a minute, we're desperately in need of new ways. I don't have the direct media. I'm pretty sure Dead Space did spend more on direct media. That would correlate well. Media spend always correlates really high with sales. So I'll update this next year if they let me come back and speak. And sales is a little bit different, 3-week versus 4-week, but really 3-week. The story's told in terms of how that's gonna roll out. So, we can't just take games, put a bunch of pre-order excitement, stick it in a store, and it really is contextual. I mean, EEDAR's tagline, context is everything. Why? Because no one data point is going to solve the problem. You have to be looking at the whole life cycle. You have to be understanding it's not just about my direct media, it's not just about my PR, it's also about how are my developers building relationships with the community? How are we maintaining our brand? Did we deliver on the promise of the DLC that we said we were going to deliver? All of these things factor into the next purchase that they're going to make. And as we just talked about, less and less games, less and less brands that can survive. How do you keep them in your brand? Gaming as a service is about ensuring that they love you, they love your brand, they love the way you work with them and respect with them. And yeah, there's the vocal minority out there with the Mass Effect 3 endings and these things that stir up a lot of hornets' nests. But the reality is you can control the way people think of your product by delivering good products and delivering good messages. And that's really the critical thing that we have to be focusing on achieving. Because creating a breakout success now demands organic consumers. Why? Let's think of the funnel, right? The funnel has 3 ways that people can come to your game. You can buy them. That's what most of the people in this room do. And on traditional games, 50% of your users are going to come from your direct media campaign. We can earn them, right? So we can go out and we can write cool press and stories and we can bring people in. And that does have a big piece. And it's kind of blended in with the organic piece quite strongly. This is the key. Organic is what drives it. And as we move towards having to embrace these new business models, having to deal with free-to-play gaming as a reality, subscription, multi-games in a subscription HBO-type package is the future, we have to understand how are we going to get all these people in? How bad is the funnel problem? Well, let me walk you through the funnel problem. Let's take fictitious Greg's game. Let's assume that there's 50 million Xbox, PlayStation 2000s out there. And I'm going to run my direct media campaign. So I could assume, I'll say a $5 million campaign, maybe I'm going to get 2.5 million people to convert, and I get all that money because it's a premium game. They're paying me up front. So at $36 after I pay everybody, I make $90 million. Okay, good deal. On a free-to-play game, same type of conversion rates. After they convert, I got to get them to pay. So it's great that I got them to download, but now I got to get them to pay the game. So then I have this huge drop-off. So my funnel needs to be much, 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 much higher. 200 million people maybe that I'm reaching to, and I'm still only maybe getting $10 million. So this is the problem with free-to-play. Even though in China there are games making $5 million a month, it's the 1% in 40,000 games, right? I mean, there's lots of edge cases that get us very excited about these new businesses, but the reality is the money's getting spread further and further apart, and it's getting much harder for bigger organizations to continue to be profitable because these are like sort of nickel and diming away the edges, and then they've got the big brands in the middle, and there's nothing in between. So when you bring this together, why is organic so critical? Pretty simple matter. There's a big gap. If you take all the users that you can basically buy with the direct media budget, and you take the users that you can hopefully get through PR and blogs and various people to see that your game's out there, and these are fictitious numbers, but trying to illustrate the point. Even in optimistic conditions, like where am I going to find that extra 25 million people to expose my advertisement to, or that 100 million people who need to see that ad? It's really, really hard if we're not in the right place. And the only way you're really going to get it is by virality. It's through word of mouth. It's through a game getting enough momentum that other outlets pick it up, that it starts to become a beast of its own. And we all talk about virality. We've been talking about it for years, right? Ever since the Bees campaign with Halo. But the truth is, it's really, really hard. We've all been trying to help people achieve it. If your game is not awesome, that's where it starts. If your game's not awesome, you're in a lot of trouble. Because even if you get them there, they're not going to do anything. So your game's got to be awesome. Your creative has to be awesome and different. Your relationships with the customer have to be starting to be treated as a permanent relationship with the customer. You can't burn them and think that they're going to come back and be all happy, happy, joy, joy. It doesn't work that way. And of course, this is all going to get fantastic because, as Sony's already alluded to, in the next few years, it'll be unlimited catalog, on demand, anytime, any game, anywhere, any place. So now, like the iOS issue is going to be affecting us 100% in traditional gaming spaces as well. It's the natural evolution. But we have to try and figure out, how are we going to change our business to adapt to this next hurdle? We haven't even dealt with the previous hurdles. So we've got a lot of things to deal with. There is some excitement and a challenge. I'm challenging you a lot today. And that is the rest of the world. More people are making money on iOS in China than anywhere else right now. And this is going to be the next big one, Latin America. I'm sure you're all hopefully starting to hear about Latin America. It's blowing up. It's getting big. And with the next generation of consoles and more digital consumption, it's really, really going to grow. So that's good for us, right? Because now we have more consumers that want to buy our stuff. But it's really bad for us because, how much do we really know about China and Latin America? China's hard, because it's kind of its own state, and there's all government regulations, and it's complicated. Latin America's a little bit easier, south of the border. We'll go to Machu Picchu. But really, we have big gaps, Sales data is really hard to find. Marketing spend data is tricky to get. Tracking data on consumer preferences is hard to find. They're all used to pirating for the last 10 years. There's changes there that are hard for us. But we have to, within our marketing departments, we got to start thinking globally. We can't keep operating as like we're North America and that's Europe and those are the Latin American people, because it's all got to tie together. Creating the right assets, creating the right experience, building the right relationships has to be cohesive. It has to be something we can all work on together. Otherwise, we're going to be doing it very expensive. And then the smaller, nimble companies, they'll come in and they'll take bites out of us. Unless you are the smaller, nimble companies, in which case, good for you. Okay, so 3 key takeaways. One of the things we have to do, we have to engage consumers. It's going to be a constant battle. We cannot operate anymore with the I made a product, I shipped a product, I'm done, I'm moving on to the next product model. Can't do it. We have to be building relationships, building communities. Capcom with the Unity initiative, they're really ahead of the game. There's, obviously, Ubisoft's trying to do this now with Uplay and building up their hub. There's the Origin Club that's trying to bring everyone under their piece. Steam and Steambox is interesting. Do you have your solution to bring people together? It's a question you've got to ask yourself. How are you keeping in touch with your consumers beyond opt-in emails that spam them and go in the junk mail, right? What are you doing that's actually going to create them to feel like they're a part of your brand and a part of your company's culture? We have to embrace every consumer, right? And it's not just about male and female, young and old. It's about China. It's about Latin America, right? It's about the people who want to pay free to play. It's about the people who we wanted to have them continue to pay premium price points for high definition games. We have to be working towards creating a culture where people understand the difference between a $100 game and a free to play game. Because that's going to be the future of our industry, is being able to create new business models that differentiate on price, differentiate consistently on value and on quality, so people understand what they're buying. If we know what we're buying, then we're more willing to pay. And maybe that whole $3 coffee game issue will start to sort of go away. And most importantly, we have to stop operating as if our eyes are closed. I've worked really, really hard over the last few years to get different data vendor companies to share their data, through EEDAR for publishers so that we can bring things to one place. I'm working really hard with lots of publishers to try and get more transparency around digital sales data. There's people in this room who are part of those initiatives. What are you doing to try and get your organization to work with other organizations to help solve some of these problems? If we keep operating like we're all fighting against one another and we're all competing with one another, we're going to kind of go the music industry route. We're going to get right down to the bottom of the barrel before we kind of go, oh crap, we screwed ourselves. But we're not there yet. We really aren't. There's a lot of opportunity out there. There's a lot of money being made in the video game space. But we're not on a good track right now because we're continuing to operate fairly arrogantly that we can just keep making core games, and sooner or later they'll turn into the core gamers we used to know. It's not going to happen. We have a new generation of people. They grew up under different conditions, with different purchasing habits, with different technology availability. And we have to change to meet them. We have to take the game to them, the message to them, and we have to build a relationship with them. And if we don't do that, then we're all going to be looking for slightly different jobs as time goes on. Maybe we'll get different publishers who figured it out. Maybe that's where we'll end up. But we have got a lot of work to do as an industry, and I hope that you can take some of these messages back into your organization and working with your peers to help think about how can your company become more nimble and how can your company address these challenges that are being faced in a productive way for the business. That's it. Thank you so much for your time.